Plea for forgiveness from the victims of sex abuse by priests. The Pope telling worshipers at Mass today that this year, quote, the sins of priests came to light, particularly the abuse of little ones. That's a quote. He also said, quote, we beg forgiveness from God and from the persons involved while promising to do everything possible to ensure that such abuse will never occur again. Critics expressing disappointment with his failure to outline a specific plan of action to weed out pedophiles and expose bishops who manipulate their location to protect them. Here to mix it up is our panel, Democratic strategist Chris Kofinas and political editor for the Washington Examiner, Chris Stirewalt. A pleasure to see you both. Chris Stirewalt, I'll begin with you. None of us, I presume, are ultimately Grand Vatican experts here, but the layman question that strikes me, Chris Stirewalt, is if there is evidence of sexual predation, that is a legal crime in this country. How is it appropriate for the Pope to come up with any scheme? Isn't this a matter for federal authorities?
Well, sure. I mean, wherever you have an incident where there has been a crime perpetrated against a child, you have what prosecutors call an evidence-based prosecution, where they're not going to have necessarily a cooperative witness and they can still go forward. And certainly American citizens should expect that the law would be enforced. I think what the Pope was doing was talking to a troubled congregation, his troubled flock, that's very concerned about the fact that this has been a decades-long problem. So I think there's a legal issue, and then there's a ecclesiastical issue.
Yeah, Chris Kofinas, when you look at the system of the Catholic Church, with bishops having tremendous power to move their professionals, if you will, around, the priests, from one location to the next, absent some real structural alteration from the Church to bring transparency in its own peculiar way to that reality, is there a solution? In other words, as long as I allow the power structure to be secretive and move people around, how do I deal with this problem?
Well, I mean, listen, I think the first thing what you're seeing the Pope say today in terms of his language, I mean, it's obviously, I think, was strong. I mean, in a lot of people's minds, way too late. But the message, I think, pales in comparison to what needs to happen, which is the actions. And that is where I think you need, both internally and externally, fundamental reforms. And they need to do something to show people, both, I would say, who are Catholic, who have, serious concerns at what's been happening, as well as, I think, the rest of the world who are deeply concerned about these abuses, that they're taking steps, dramatic steps, to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And that seems to be the fundamental piece in all of these discussions that seems to be missing. And until they address that in a public way, whether it's appointing an independent prosecutor or some type of cooperation with legal authorities, I'm not sure what the exact answer should be. But until they take substantive actions, they're going to keep going back to this problem, and it's not going to get fixed. And their image and the problem, I hate to say, is going to get worse.
At the end of the day, Chris Stirewalt, how much does something like this come down to federal officials or local law enforcement officials deferring to the local church in pulling back their willingness to investigate and or truly inquire inside a given parish or church because of the obviously high status role that the church plays in communities?
Probably geographically dependent. In heavily Catholic communities like Boston, you saw that there was a reticence on the part of local law enforcement to step beyond the altar, if you will, and get involved. But I think the point here that Chris made, that's the right one, is that the Church has a serious problem. We had a Reformation 600 years ago, so that there are a lot of choices, and there are a lot of places that Catholics can go now to worship and be part of the Christian community. And they don't have to be part of the Catholic Church, and they're understanding that. And unless the Catholic Church says and does things in a way that reassures American Catholics that they've got this under control, they're going to lose their flock to Protestant denominations.
Yeah. No, many layered. Great analysis from both of you. Chris and Chris, enjoy your weekend, guys. Thank you very much. Chris Kofinas, Chris Stirewalt.